Alright, welcome back. And today we are talking about, we're at number 4 on the top 10 worst Twilight Zone episodes. Today's episode is called Back There, and it stars Professor from Gilligan's Island. And the plot of this one is, Professor is one of the rich fellows from this fancy club, and they're having the most petty argument about time travel, which is, when you go back to a certain time, can you change things, or can you not change things? And the answer, at least to me, is yes, you definitely can change things, because you, unlike everyone else in a given time period, as a time traveler, you have free will, and that's what makes time travel so dangerous. I mean, unless future timelines go on as predicted, but the point being that this episode has the most base level argument on time travel that I think it is possible to have. It's just, can you change time or can you not change time? And the plot is, by magic, Professor is transported back, all the way back, to the night of Lincoln's assassination. And the first thing he does is go to the police and say, Lincoln is going to be killed tonight. Don't ask me how I know, but he's going to be killed. And, of course, they think he's a lunatic. They think he's going to shoot the president, so they put him in jail. Then a fellow with a mustache comes up, and I think, it's John Wilkes Booth. But no one else thinks that, not even Professor. And he's just like, well, give me this guy, I'll take him into custody. And the police are like, okay. So then John Wilkes Booth takes Professor out, drugs him, and then, so the Professor can't stop his assassination. And then he also gives him, like, this handkerchief with John Wilkes Booth's initials on. And then it's like, Professor's like, oh no, I didn't stop the assassination. And then he's transported back to the present. But it turns out that he did affect something minor. One of his friends now has, like, a different job, I think the butler of the club became one of the members of the club or something. So then Professor's like, he pulls out the handkerchief and he's like, I didn't think I could change time, but oh my gosh, I did change time, which is the most lazy twist, because, it's a 50-50 probability. Either you can change time, or you can't change time. This episode thinks it's really clever by revealing that the guy with the mustache is John Wilkes Booth. It's like, of course he's John Wilkes Booth. He hears about some guy who's gone to the cops and says President Lincoln's going to be shot tonight. He thinks Professor knows something, or he's found something out. The other thing is, about John Wilkes Booth, about this episode really, is that Professor is horrible at preventing Lincoln's assassination. He goes to the police and just says, the president's going to be shot. They're going to put him in jail. This is what he could do. He could do so many more effective things. He could, set the theater on fire so that Lincoln doesn't go there that night. He could go directly up to Lincoln and say, hey, Lincoln, don't go to the theater. And then maybe Lincoln would be more willing to listen to him than the police. He could say, or he could just leave a note on the police station that says, haha, I'm going to kill the president tonight. You try and stop me. And then the police will give the president a bodyguard. Or, just so many ways besides just telling the police. That's very lazy. You're a time traveler. You don't just tell the police. You can do things, Or you can just straight up shoot John Wilkes Booth. You could just find John Wilkes Booth. Because this time John Wilkes Booth isn't on the run. You could just look him up in the telegraph book or whatever. This isn't hard to figure out. My gosh, Professor, you're horrible at preventing historical events. This episode is really lazy. My personal favorite of the time travel genre isn't Loop or anything. It's or Primer or whatever. It's just straight up Back to the Future. That is such a fun series, and think about all the cool, convoluted time travel stuff that happens in that. It goes from the 80s to the 50s, back to the 80s, to the future, to the alternate 80s, to the 50s, back to the Old West, and back to the 80s. Like, my gosh. And you got all, like, you got different Biffs, you got different Martys, you got different Docs all flying around, interacting with each other. It's really cool. It's a really cool time travel. And everyone will say it's not scientifically accurate, but I think it's a pretty good prediction of what could happen if time travel was found out. It's plausible. We don't know what time travel will be like. It could be like Back to the Future, or it could be like Primer. I think Back to the Future is logically coherent, except for the fact that the future it predicts is insane. That was kind of resolved on either, was it Jimmy Kimmel or Jimmy Fallon? I forget. But at any rate, that's an interesting time travel story. This isn't an interesting time travel story, and you might just say, well, it's because the genre wasn't developed that well. The first time travel story, The Time Machine by H.G. Wells, is amazing. So this is just very subpar time travel. Like, my God, 100 yards over the rim? Amazing. This is just complete garbage. And part of why it is because Professor's in it. Professor's one of those actors. He's an okay actor. He was in This Island Earth, and in the MST3K version, they won't let it go. But he's one of those actors, you just see him in Gilligan's Island, and then you can't forget that he's Professor, like, my gosh. And he's not playing Professor here, so he could be smart. I mean, Gilligan's Island, yeah, obviously Professor could fix the SS Minnow. He just doesn't, for writing purposes. But then you've got this, what's supposed to be this, like, high-octane thriller. It's the night of Lincoln's assassination. But he's horrible at doing anything. He just goes to the police and says the president will be shot and they won't think it's him who's doing it. He's an absolute moron. And you got just the most awful twist. Like, it's not even really a twist because, oh, you thought it was just a dream, but it's not. Like, why does it have to be a dream? I can accept time travel, whatever, even if it is pretty lazy and just, blurry sequence. This episode has nothing to offer. It is devoid of anything. Like, Mike, just everything in it is just a horrible example of time travel. And there are interesting things you can do with time travel. You got Harry Turtledove, you got so many cooler things to do with time travel that this episode ignores, because all it's interested in is, well, can you change things in history, or can you not? And it's like, yes, of course you can. If you're a time traveler, Professor is a time traveler. He has every opportunity to save Lincoln, and he doesn't. And then, when he doesn't, and Lincoln gets shot, he's just like, well, I guess I can't change history. It's just the most depressing, like, just, what the F, Professor? You're supposed to be smart. You can build a radio out of coconuts. You can't fix a boat. But if you're transported back to the time of Lincoln, save Lincoln. So anyway, that's number 4 on the list of the worst of the Twilight Zones. Shoo boy, we're about to get a lot worse. Up at number 3. Or is this number 5? I don't know at this point. I'm tired.
Now, what's your point? That if it were possible for a person to go back in time, there'd be nothing in the world to prevent him from altering the course of history?
Professor wouldn't kill a fly, Gilligan. Yeah, he's saving up his strength to kill people.
But I'd be an anachronism. I really don't belong back there. You... Ah, gentlemen, you're just in time. Now, history tells us that on October 24th, 1929, the bottom fell out of the stock market. Show you how this operates, especially since I designed it mostly for you.